Welcome friends, Silas here. This is a short video to help you to understand the mechanics of folding forward a little better. This was a huge struggle for me. I played soccer my entire youth growing up till the point where I just couldn't get past my kneecaps basically, because I enjoyed the soccer so much, I hated the stretching and I avoided it. So at some point when I started to forward fold, I couldn't even get past my kneecaps. And I didn't really understand the mechanics of how can I get deeper into my fold. I thought I have to keep my knees straight, and then I started reaching my hands down and around it through my upper back, and I just tried to get down deeper. My tailbone was dropping towards the floor and I was wondering why I'm not getting anywhere. So a forward fold doesn't happen from your back. Forward fold happens from your hips. So there is a mechanic in the hips that we have to understand in the first place, what is posterior and anterior tilt. So bring your hands to your hips and feel the frontal hip bones. Then imagine your entire pelvis is a bowl, and in that bowl is water. And now you begin to let the hip bones drop towards the front into anterior tilt. And you're imagining you're letting the water float out the front. And then pull the hip bones up towards you and let the bowl move towards the back, like you're emptying the water out through the tailbone, through the back of your hips. And then come back towards neutral. And then continue to do that movement on your own, letting the hips drop one more time. Let them drop forward, and then move them into posterior tilt, lift them up. And then notice something about the back of the legs as you move the pelvis into anterior and posterior tilt. So the next time you come into anterior tilt, that means the front of the pelvis drops. You notice how the back of the pelvis rises and then elongates the back of your legs. And if you let the frontal hips rise back up, you move the pelvis into anterior tilt, you're actually shortening your hamstrings or the back of your legs. So if you imagine a gummy or like a band at the back of your legs, every time you're going into posterior tilt, you're loosening the band. Every time you're going into anterior tilt, you're lengthening, you're stretching the band. So that's the first mechanic of the forward folding, imagining that the hip bones slightly move down and you come into an anterior tilt in your pelvis to lengthen the back of your legs. And then keep the heart lifting as you begin to hinge from your hips. And then instead of trying to keep the legs straight, bend the knees generously. Bend them generously. So much in fact that when you come forward, the spine stays long and your rib cage melts onto your thighs. You continue to lift the tailbone up so the pelvis moves into anterior tilt. And then the hands can come onto the floor with fingertips, or you can even hold onto your ankles or calves. And then from here, you begin to move the legs towards straight without losing the connection of your rib cage and your thighs. And that might mean that the knees are bent a fair bit, but you're keeping the heart smiling, the shoulder heads draw back, and you're simply moving into or towards straightening the legs. You don't have to straighten them like straight away. If it happens, great. But don't lose the long spine. Don't lose the anterior tilt to lift the back of the hips up to actually lengthen the back of the legs. All right. And then bend your knees, come all the way down. So the same mechanics happen in all forward folds. It doesn't matter if it is a standing forward fold or if it's Janu Shirshasana or even a normal forward bent seating. The same actions in the pelvis happens here as well. So if you sit on your bum, both legs go straight out towards the front, and you notice, oh, my tailbone, my entire pelvis is moving into posterior tilt, and I'm rounding my back to get forward, you're losing the hamstrings, because the back of the pelvis moves towards the back of the knees, and you're loosening the back of the legs. Instead of moving the hip bones down, coming into anterior tilt to lengthen the back of the legs. If this feels quite impossible to do because you're just so tight, and I know exactly how it feels. There are ways to work around it. You can use a blanket, you can even use a block, even a cushion if you don't have either of them, and you place it behind you. And depending on how thick you roll it, the easier it is. So the thicker, the more effective you feel that pelvis tilt. So place it behind your bum and then lift your hips up and place them onto either the blanket or the block. And then bring your sitting bones onto the edge of the blanket and then let them drop over the front, and notice how that lifts the back of the pelvis up and it lets the front of the pelvis drop down. If the hamstrings are still so tight that you feel your back rounding, bend your knees once more and then lift up through the heart and begin to fold forward from here. So you can keep the knees bent greatly to catch your feet. If you can't catch your feet at all, use a towel or a strap. Yoga strap comes in handy, and you just loop it around your feet to then keep the long back and keep the frontal pelvis move into anterior tilt. From here, you can decide if the knees stay bent or you move them towards straight. But keep the upper body aligned, the shoulders drawing back, the pelvis upright, really moving the stretch into the back of the legs. And then if you in the forward fold and the legs are straight, move the thighs actively towards the ground. So by lifting the kneecaps towards your hips, you're driving the center of the thighs down, legs are active, the toes curl back. The heart moves forward. All right. This is only a short tutorial on the mechanics of what's happening in the hips, what's happening by bending the knees. I hope this was helpful. Let me know in the comments, and I hope you can apply this to your everyday yoga practice and your forward folds. Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon. Bye.